For 2026, I want you to understand the principle that changes everything for teachers. And when you understand the principle that changes everything for teachers and how to apply it, it'll not only change your life, it'll change your career, and it will determine whether your future self actually makes it in the profession of teaching. So in this video, what I want to share with you is the exact principle that changed how I approach teaching, how I handle my responsibilities at school, and how I'm able to stay in education without losing my ever-loving flipping mind and losing my own identity. And I didn't learn this principle until it was almost too late, because nearly 3 years ago, I woke up and my face had gone paralyzed. I couldn't move my face. I couldn't blink my eye. And I thought I had a stroke. I went to the doctor. Fortunately, I did not have a stroke. But my doctor said this, and he said it very clearly to me. He said, John, he said, if you don't do something about your stress is going to do something about you. And what he meant is that eventually I was going to have a catastrophic health event. And you would think that that would be enough to get my attention, but it wasn't. The fact of the matter is I kept working, I kept pushing, and without realizing it, I kept violating the principle that changes everything, and it almost cost me everything that I had, including my life. Now, here's what I think. I think that there are hundreds of thousands of teachers across the world who are in those very shoes right there. Their health is not very good. They're pushing as hard as they possibly can. They're violating the principle that changes everything. Why does that keep happening? Because teaching didn't suddenly get hard. It's always been hard. It's always going to be hard. Teachers didn't suddenly lose the ability to bounce back. The reason why this keeps happening is because the constant pressure that we carry is invisible. And when it's invisible, it becomes unrelenting. It's the idea of, like, you put a frog in water and then you turn the heat on up underneath of it. Well, the frog doesn't notice it, and it just stays there and it stays there and it stays there. And then before long, the frog is completely boiled. That is exactly what is happening to teachers. We are under so much pressure. There's so many demands on top of us. There's so many people coming at us, whether it's students, whether it's the administration, whether it's a colleague, or whether it's the parents, or whether it's the district. It doesn't matter who it is, that it places us under this constant pressure. And what has happened is that pressure, it feels normal. The thing about that is that it's not normal, and it's doing some things to our nervous system which are not healthy. Teachers carry responsibilities that are never intended to have been the responsibility of the teacher, and those responsibilities are not being limited, they're actually being extended. And when I think about the things that we carry, the number one thing that teachers carry that I think is most damaging is the emotional regulation of others. And what I mean is, we have so many students in our schools today that are completely dysregulated emotionally. And who does that fall back on? Does that fall back on the admin? Does that fall back on the district? Does that fall back on the parents? And who's expected to regulate these students? Is it not the teacher? When did it become the teacher's responsibility to regulate students or to be a mental health care professional? The second thing is that there's a lot of gaps in the system. The number one gap that we've seen in our district is a lack of mental health care professionals. I can tell you that the mental health care problems among students is at such a high level that the mental health care professionals that we do have contracted, they can't keep up with it. And guidance counselors can't keep up with all that. And who is that problem falling back on? It falls back on the teachers. Number three, we're the last line of defense. And, you know, teachers have always been mandatory reporters. But we have become the line of defense for the mental health problems, or the last line of defense for the mental health problems of students. For years in our district, I taught a program called Youth Mental Health First Aid. And the whole idea was to try to teach teachers how to triage and how to handle some of the mental health crises that our students are dealing with. That is an invisible weight that teachers around the world are carrying. And it's very, very difficult. And it's having its toll on teachers. What is the principle that changes everything, and how can it change our life, and how can it change our approach to teaching? The principle that changes everything is this: clarity is what keeps teachers in the game. A lot of what we deal with in our profession, yes, there's a lot of external problems, like we talked about. Emotional regulation, being a stopgap, having to do things that we were never trained to do or even know how to do. There's a lot of that. But the number one thing that we deal with are internal issues. And oftentimes we don't have good clarity on exactly what it is that we're struggling with. So at Teacher Talk, we're a faith-forward organization. It's not because we want to be offensive. That's just who we are. Our core verse at Teacher Talk is Proverbs chapter 4, verse number 23, that says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The most important thing that we can do as teachers and as people is to guard our heart. Put something in front of your heart so that these external problems don't infiltrate you inwardly and then begin to affect your outward behavior. Now, as a moment of honesty, that is exactly what happened to me. Is I allowed all of these things that were going on around me, all the things that I didn't like, all the things that I was angry about, all the things that I was frustrated with, and I allowed those things to infiltrate me. And then all of a sudden, that's what began to flow out of me. So yes, there are external problems, but there are internal problems. And here's what I would suggest to you. We don't have the ability to solve a lot of the external problems in education. It's my contention that we are completely at the will of legislators, of politicians who make up silly rules and silly mandates, and they place them on top of our back because they believe that it's going to make things better. And then it doesn't. And all of that stuff funnels down, whether it's from the federal government, the state government, and it funnels down all the way to who? Me and you. That's where it funnels down to. And there's not a single thing that we can do about it. But we can do something about the internal effect that it has. So clarity protects the heart. Now, a lack of clarity will wear you out. And here's the reason why. Problems will follow you home. They end up in your living room. They end up in your relationships. They end up in your car with your kids on the way home. They end up causing you to be sick, and that you have to be over at the doctor's office trying to figure out what in the world's wrong with you. And everything begins to feel personal. That is one of the things that I dealt with whenever I was in the terrible state of burnout, is I began to believe that like the whole world was against me. And I began to believe that the things that were happening, that these were personal attacks. It felt like, well, we're just going to hold you down. And that's the mental position that we can find ourselves in. And so clarity doesn't remove responsibility. It puts boundaries around responsibility. And that's extraordinarily important. And here's something that I want you to see right here. This resource, I'll bring it up on the screen. You can go in the description box and you can get that. One of our best guides down there. It's free. It's 100% free, and it's always free. Is our Reclaim Your Limits guide. It'll help you set your personal and professional boundaries. It's just a little thing for you to work through. It doesn't take long to do that, but you can work through it multiple times, and hopefully that'll help you gain some clarity and be able to get through some of the things that we struggle with as it relates to setting boundaries. The principle that changes everything. Clarity is what keeps teachers in the game. Now, I want to give you 5 really quick principles of how this principle works out. Number one, clarity begins with placing a label on the real problem. The writer of Proverbs in Proverbs chapter 20, verse number 5 says this: the purpose of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out, which is exactly what we're trying to do right here in this conversation. We're trying to talk to people, whether it's through video or whether it's through these live streams, and our goal is to draw out insights, because the heart is like an ocean, and it can hold an infinite, seemingly, amount of junk in it. But if you can draw it out, and if you can put a label on it, then you can deal with it. Application number 2. Clarity separates endurance from faithfulness. The writer of the Proverbs, again, in chapter 19, verse number 2, desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet miss the way? And here's what we're aiming at, is that we confuse oftentimes endurance for faithfulness. Faithfulness and endurance are not the same thing. Look at what the proverb says again: desire without knowledge. You can have all this desire, all this gumption, and all these things that you want to do, but if you don't have the knowledge in how to appropriately do those things, or do those things in such a way that you're not gonna damage yourself and your health, that's not good. And the Proverbs goes on to say, how much more will hasty feet, or those who just scurry about their way, or who go all in this direction, how much more will they miss the way? Endurance and faithfulness are not the same. Endurance without clarity leads to erosion. It'll lead to the erosion of your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, and your emotional health. It brings a crash. And so I just want to take just a second and remind you, again, we've got some free resources, and here's one for you right here. All right. It's the same place. It's the same QR code. Jump down in there, or you can go in the description box. And I want you to find the resource called a 5-minute reset. Now, it's true that 5 minutes is not going to cure a problem. All right. And that's not the intent at all. Rather, a 5-minute reset, the intent is to get you some habits that you can do every day, 3 or 4 times a day, whether it's a little bit of movement, or it's a breathing exercise, or it's a journaling exercise. There's 3 or 4 different things right there that you can do that helps clear your mind and tell your nervous system that everything's okay. It's down there for you. I want you to jump down there and grab it, either in the description box, or you can use the QR code right there, whichever one you desire. Application number 3 is clarity brings unspoken expectations into the light. Proverbs 27:12 says, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and they pay the penalty. I absolutely love that. Have you ever heard any more common sense in your entire life? People who think about things, they see danger, so they do something about it. But the simple people, or unwise people, they just go about their way and they pay the penalty. It's ironic to me that so much so that we talk about on here, of all the things that we struggle with as teachers, we see them, but we don't necessarily understand them because we don't take any action to take care of ourselves. Instead of taking refuge and putting things in place in our life to try to prevent those things from gaining a foothold in our life, we just go headlong into it and we pay the price. I don't know how many. There must be 2,000 comments that I've replied to this week that talk about how teaching is destroying their health, or their mental health, or their relationships, or their ability to sleep, and on and on and on. Well, if we know those things, if we see the danger, then we should take some refuge and try to head that off. So When things are not labeled and said out loud, then those things have no limit as to how far they can go in our life. Application number 4 is clarity replaces guilt with discernment. How many of you out there know that a lot of what we do as teachers is all based on guilt? We feel bad because we didn't do this, or because we didn't get this thing over here done. Or our administrators can very easily guilt us into taking, subbing a class, or taking up an extra duty because there's nobody that'll do it. And if nobody does it, then the kids are going to have to go without, that type of stuff. But listen to what the writer of the Proverbs says. He says differently. He says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not onto your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Guilt will absorb every bit of your energy, your mental clarity, your emotional resilience, and most of all, your spiritual health. But discernment makes decisions. Discernment makes decisions based on what are my responsibilities? What am I able to handle right now? What will my calendar allow me to do? How will this affect my family? Or how will this affect my health? Do you see the difference? Guilt absorbs the problems of other people. Discernment decides what is best all the way around. There's the difference. Clarity replaces guilt with discernment. Application number 5 is clarity uses boundaries to protect what matters. This is my favorite proverb of all. Proverbs chapter 25 and 28. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Now think about that. In the ancient day, what does a wall do? Well, it keeps the enemies out, and it keeps the people on the inside safe. But if the wall is broken down, then all of a sudden, bad things get in and good things get out. And he says that a person, like a city whose walls are broken through, is a person who lacks self-control. Boundaries are not intended to be restrictions on us. Boundaries are intended to protect us and to control ourselves. Because a person with no self-control, in the context that we're talking about, will take on all of these other tasks, all these other responsibilities, all these implied things. They'll take them on, and you become like one who lacks self-control. Boundaries bring control into our lives. Boundaries do not reduce our ability to care for ourselves. They increase our ability to protect ourselves. The principle that changes everything. Clarity is what keeps teachers in the game. If you want to stay in the game, teachers, you got to get clarity. Let me ask everybody a question here. What is the one thing you need to label in your life? Drop it down in the chat. Share with us. What is the one thing that you need to label that you're struggling with, you're dealing with, so it no longer wears you out? I want you to address it this week. And I want you to watch this video right here. So stay strong and keep teaching.